talking about We Are All African 20 years later. So why don't you kind of fill everybody in on what exactly the controversy was?
Right. So in 2005, I'm teaching a course at a Southern Ontario University, critical thinking course, 93 students. Everything's going well. It had occurred to me with the research that I had done at Harvard earlier in the 2000s, it seemed pretty obvious that the evidence was overwhelming for human origins, that the descent came from Africa. I mean, it was overwhelming. Spencer Wells was doing work with the Genographic Project with National Geographic, and he was taking swabs of hundreds of thousands of people around the world and checking out their DNA and finding basically everything led back to Africa. So for the first time we had genetic evidence. I bought one of these kits and we used it on Matt, my youngest son, and it showed our haplotype descendancy went from Africa and pretty much ended in Italy. And you don't tell them your name or anything, you just say male, what age you are. So the evidence seemed to me, to be overwhelming. The fossil evidence, the anthropological evidence, the developmental evidence, the patterns, everything was there. And so it occurred to me, all humans descended from common ancestors from the African continent. Darwin predicted this, and now we had overwhelming evidence. And as a professor teaching critical thinking, I felt obligated to write something on the board to get the students interested, to get them talking, to get them motivated. And those four words were, we are all African. Not Africans, that seems to be of the present tense, but African meaning that's where we all came from. And when I did that, a student put up their hand and said, yeah, but how do you know that? Which is a great question. So I said, well, all of the evidence, points in that direction. And the way in which science works is you follow the evidence wherever it leads. And where it has led my colleagues and I is to the conclusion that everybody, when you look around the room here and you see all your different features, different skin colors and tonalities, all of that coalesces back in Africa 40, 50, 60, 100, 200,000 years ago. That means we're all related. That means we're all kind of like cousins. And I found this was a really important message that no other professors were teaching, because in a single sentence with 4 words, it cuts across all racial boundaries and all human claims for privilege and status. And it made everybody equal in 4 words. And so I thought these were very, very powerful words. So I wrote them on the board and I said, if evolutionary theory is correct, and I believe it is the best account for how we've gotten here, then it follows that we all have to have descended out of Africa. And so the student was indigenous, and said, but my people...
Indigenous, like Canadian?
Canadian, yeah. Brantford area, 6 Nations. And yeah, she said, my people wouldn't accept that. And I said, I get that, right? I get it. There's a lot of different Indian mythologies and spiritual beliefs about how their ancestors arrived, the turtle's back and the sky woman. There's a lot of different ways in which indigenous peoples believed to have originated. But then she said, who's right? And as a professor, I couldn't just say, well, that's not important, or, well, that doesn't even matter, or you're speaking your truth and I'm speaking my truth, which is meaningless to me as an analytic philosopher. So I said, not your people, but how do we have this conversation, right? How do we do this? So I said, can you invite some elders into the classroom, and I'll invite some scientific colleagues of mine, and we'll discuss how we have this debate, how we have this conversation when we have these so-called culture clashes between science and spirituality. And the class erupted in applause. Everybody was keen on this. They were looking forward to this. But I didn't hear back from the student. And I was up for a tenure track position. One had been created for critical thinking, and I had to be shortlisted. I had to be interviewed because of my seniority at this university. So it was looking pretty good. I had actually met with the VP, and she had shown me the job description, and I thought, wow, this is wonderful. About 10 days later, I got a registered letter in the mail, opened it up, and it was from the dean, associate dean of the university, saying basically that particular Indigenous student and 2 fundamentalist Christian students in the class got together and wrote letters and accused me of being racist and Eurocentric, which I didn't get. They basically said I was being racist by foisting my ideas of what equality actually meant by claiming we were all African, and I was Eurocentric because I was using science to prove my point. And this was 2005 that this was occurring. So what had happened was no elders were coming into the class and no discussions were forthcoming. And what had happened was the position was retracted. It just sort of went away.